my own lived experience was I prefer to the point where I jeopardized my career, is I preferred the cannabis because it felt more like I was taking care of myself than the pills where it felt more like I was masking stuff.
Right. Wow. That's real.
Lava for Good and Stand Together Music present the War on Drugs podcast, Season 2. This season, we're diving deeper into the real stories behind the war on drugs, its impact, its failures, and the people offering a better path forward. Today on the show, two-time All-American Texas Longhorn and 1998 Heisman Trophy winner, 2002 NFL League leader in rushing, All-Pro and Pro Bowl selectee for the Miami Dolphins, and longtime cannabis advocate, Mr. Ricky Williams. All right, welcome to Season 2 of the War on Drugs.
Yes. We're talking to real people. We get to hear their real stories about how they've been impacted by the war on drugs. And, you know, we're fighting it. We're working. The war on drugs is still waging.
Yeah.
It's going.
Yeah.
But we still fighting a good fight. I mean, you fighting it a little more than me, but, I'm with you.
I don't know, yeah. People probably hear your fight a little bit more than mine. I write a lot of stuff, and I don't think anyone reads it. We'll see. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. But I appreciate
the important people who need to read it are going to read it.
Exactly. Yeah. We're going to kick it off with one that I know we were both really excited to talk to.
Oh, yeah.
Ricky Williams, former Texas running back.
Yes.
NFL running back. I'm a big Ravens fan. He played with the Ravens for a little bit, Saints, all these other teams. And I remember, like, those interviews that he was doing because there was so much pressure. Like, on it, people don't know, the Saints essentially, New Orleans Saints traded like their entire draft to move up to get this guy.
He was their only draft pick.
Like, it was literally their only draft
They traded
pick.
everything away.
And so everything was on. Like, the team was, I don't even know, they won maybe like 2 games a year before they stunk.
Yeah.
And this was like the savior, and the media was just all around him. And it was not, he used to have interviews like his helmet on, a visor, and like, so you could, and people back, you know, it was just like, oh, look at crazy guy, weed smoker guy.
Standoffish. He doesn't like people.
You look at those old interviews, they weren't that from that long ago. Like, the lack of knowledge, like, it actually helps sometimes to know, like, we are moving in a good direction. Kind of seeing like how people talked about him back then. Like, he would not be talked about that way now.
Right.
Someone would say, and then there would be a bunch of people being like, obviously this is someone dealing with either, you know, like, we are the problem. You know, there would be like some back and forth. Then it was just like, look at this loopy. Yeah. It's
and
like
I don't
unfair.
know if this is where it came from, but it definitely is the sentiment from the sports journalists when you look at like Stephen A. Smith, stay off the weed. Like, and it's like, man, you need some weed.
Yeah.
Because you're yelling this early in the morning. Like, you wake up this loud. Like, my son wakes up that loud, and it is terrible.
It's crazy, the world, you know, it's 20 years ago about that he was drafted. And, you know, back then the NFL, you could be suspended for cannabis for a long time.
Oh, super strict.
Yeah.
It
was arbitrary the way that's testing, now that we know, where you have a certain amount in your system. And it was, as we know, like, they try to almost do it as like other drugs that are water soluble, like, you know, like cocaine or something like that, if you have it in there. But you could have cannabis in your system or in your urine and test positive, you know, months after. And so they're doing it on these arbitrary notions. I know they've laxed it, obviously, moving forward. They've made changes where they don't suspend anymore. They required, you know, more violations.
And they reduced the amount that could be in your system.
Right, exactly.
Drastically.
Yeah. Or they increased the amount. They increased the amount.
Yeah, and really the reason that a lot of these things have been changed is partly because of, you know, his advocacy. And I mean, I look back in 2004, and like I said, I just know the story through the media and how they painted it. And it wasn't really social media like it is now. So he could never really come out and kind of tell his story.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I'm excited. Like, I think I know the story, but I don't.
No, he definitely gave me a whole new perspective on the whole situation.
With that, Ricky Williams, here's the interview. Can't wait. Yeah.
What's going on, man?
What up? Welcome to the crib.
Thank you for having me, man. It's beautiful out here. Beautiful home, beautiful area. I don't want to tell anybody where you are right now because we want to keep it as peaceful as possible. We do not want people out here, man. It's too peaceful. Man, great to have you here. Heisman Trophy winner, Pro Bowler, advocate for the people, Ricky Williams. Glad to have you here, man.
It's good to be here.
Yes, yes. I guess I gotta hear it from you because we hear your story, especially somebody that was as prolific as you were in the sport. We hear their narration, their story of what happened, but can I get at least part of that from you? From San Diego to Texas to New Orleans to where we at now?
Yeah.
Can you give us the Ricky Williams story in his own words?
Okay. Yeah, so I grew up in San Diego, raised by a single mom, and raised by a single mom until like 7th grade, and then my mom remarried to a man from Panama.
Okay.
At Carroll. As a kid, young kid, I had a dream that I'd be a professional athlete, but at the time I thought I would be a professional baseball player.
Okay.
Big Padres fan. Played Little League, and then when I got to 8th grade, I started playing football for the first time. And after a couple of years, I was really good. So I was really good at baseball, football. Got to high school, and I was a big Bo Jackson fan. So my dream was to play baseball and football.
Yeah.
So I got drafted by the Phillies, got a chance to play some baseball, and I got a scholarship to go to the University of Texas to play football. At the time, I thought I would just play college football, and then when I was done, I would go be a professional baseball player. But I had so much success on the football field and not enough success on the baseball diamond that it kind of got flipped, and I gave up baseball and I stuck with football.
Okay.
Then I got drafted, the trade from the Saints, and Mike Ditka traded all those picks.
Everybody.
Everything. and the next year's first round pick. Everybody.
You were the only person drafted, right?
I was the only one. A couple free agents, but I was the only draft pick. Yeah. And then I had 3 so-so years in New Orleans, had a lot of injuries. Then I got traded to Miami. And that first year in Miami really took off, led the NFL in rushing, Pro Bowl, All-Pro, all that good stuff. And then I came back for my second year in Miami. And to me, it kind of started before then, but really the story started that second year, second year in Miami. Because what occurred in the first year of Miami is I failed a drug test, and I was put in the NFL's drug program.
But I'm sorry, not to cut you off, but you failed a drug test after putting up ridiculous numbers.
It was right before I put up the ridiculous numbers.
It was right before?
It was right before I put up the ridiculous.
Okay.
The timing of it was interesting. So now that's the kind of the football story up to a certain point. Now I'm going to tell more of the cannabis side of the story.
Cool.
Okay?
Yeah, great.
So growing up, my stepdad was a Rasta, and I was a huge Bob Marley fan. So my first relationship with cannabis was not as a consumer. It was just appreciating 2 wise men who I respected who used cannabis.
Right.
First book I ever read front to back was Bob Marley's biography.
Okay.
So I was like in it. But because I was because I wanted to be a professional athlete and I was a jock, and I grew up in the 80s, just say no. They didn't mix.
Right.
They didn't mix in my head. And also I grew up in San Diego, so it was all around. It was all around. And I had a couple of friends that smoked, so I probably smoked 3 or 4 times before I left high school.
Okay.
That's it. I get to college, and I started noticing that sometimes on Fridays, the guys would go to Sean, the other running back's dorm room, and shoot dice and pass a blunt around. And so I was just trying to be cool with the upperclassmen, so I mix it up with them. But again, maybe 10 times.
Right.
And then I get to my senior year in college, and I came back from my senior year because I wanted to win the Heisman Trophy. And the season started off kind of bumpy. I had a couple rough games, broke up with my girl, and I just was in a really bad place. Like, why did I come back? I was like low. And my roommate at the time was a smoker, so he was like, you just need to chill. And he slid his bong over to me. I remember I took a hit, coughed a little bit, and I went upstairs, and I was laying on the bed looking up, and I noticed it was the first time in weeks that I wasn't obsessing about all the things that were going wrong. And in that moment of clarity, I started to look to the future and think about things getting better. That was just one night. Go to sleep, wake up the next morning, and go on with my week. The next 2 weeks of the season, I had back-to-back 300-yard games, rushing. 300-yard games, back-to-back. And after that, I was like, okay, there's something here, right? There's something here. I'm not all in yet, but I can't say that this is a bad thing because it just helped me like get out of a funk,
Right.
and kind of change my season around. So, like, win the Heisman Trophy. Fast forward, go through a bunch of the draft stuff, and during the draft prep, I moved back to San Diego and had a little money. You know, so I bought my first ounce. I remember. I remember about my first ounce.
And this is you're a senior.
This is
in
right after
college.
my senior year.
Oh, this is after your
right
senior
before the
year.
draft.
So it's never like you was just a dude just smoking before every game, or
It was never that, but it was like a relationship was developing.
Okay.
You know, a relationship was developing. So I had a little free time. I was training, and I would just smoke a little bit to relax, but I didn't have a real relationship at this point. I just was messing around, and I had some free time.
Right.
I heard somebody say cannabis is synonymous with freedom, you know? And I think because of the war on drugs, I don't think it always has to be this way, but I think because of the past and the war on drugs, it kind of is, right? Where either, you know, some of my white friends, right, they had enough money that if they got in a little bit of trouble, nothing happened.
Right.
But some of us, if we got pulled over and we got a roach in the car, we're in the system.
Yeah.
So the sense that I got a little money, I got help, I can figure out if I get caught with this little bit. So I had a little bit of freedom. Then I get drafted to New Orleans, and I kind of put it aside because now I got to focus on football. So go through my rookie year, and my rookie year is a disaster. I mean, just mainly because of injuries. I just was hurt the whole year. Second year, I trained really hard. I come back killing it. In week 10, and I break my ankle. Literally, I broke my ankle on my 1,000th yard. If you look in the stats, you see I got 1,000 yards my second year in New Orleans, just because my ankle snapped. And something in me snapped at that moment because I realized I put all my heart and soul into this game, and it can just be taken away literally like
with
that.
injury.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, I need to start working on a plan B. You know, what am I going to do other than football? Because I can't trust this. And I wasn't playing, and I was hurt. That's when I really started smoking.
Okay.
You know?
Right.
And part of it was, you know, my body was healing, but most of it was trying to get my mind right. Because, you know, as an adult, all my identity had been put into being a football player. And I wasn't so attached to that anymore because I couldn't trust it. And so I needed something to clear my mind and try to figure things out. And that's when I noticed myself smoking more. So about a year later, I get traded to Miami. And in Miami, and then I was a smoker. I wouldn't say every day, but I was smoking at least 3 or 4
And
times.
Miami it lends itself to
I'm telling
that.
you, yeah, we go train, and then I just be sitting on the beach, looking at the water, you know, right? And I was in a sweet spot, right? It was kind of like back to when I was in college, where I was working on putting the past behind me. I had a new start in Miami, and I was just thinking of envisioning what the season is going to be like. So it's right before the season starts, and I come to work, and there's a little thing on my locker that says you're being tested today. I was like, what? Because back then, NFL tested only one time a year, but they had a big window when they can test, but it was only one test. And when I was in New Orleans, that one test was in training camp.
Okay.
So I thought when I got to Miami that the test would be in training camp, but it wasn't. It was in the off season. So that's when they got me.
Okay.
But again, I a couple times a week, but I wasn't glowing before games or anything.
Right.
So I get popped, and then I'm like, okay, well, they got me, so I'll just stop smoking. That was my attitude.
Okay.
I'll just stop smoking.
And at that point, what is it? A fine and suspension?
It's nothing. It's nothing.
Oh, okay, but
the first test, they just put you in the program.
Oh.
And so, but when you're not in the program, that test, one annual test, when you are in the program, 9 times a month, you get tested. 9 times a month, and if you pop, then you get a fine, and then if you pop again, you get 4 game suspension, and then you get a year suspension. So I was just on the map where I was getting tested 9 times a month, and I was like, it's fine. And they make you talk to a therapist once a week. So I was like, you know, it can't hurt to have someone to talk to.
Right.
And I don't, you know, I'm good not smoking. About 4 games into the season, I was like, I can't do this if I ain't smoking.
Right. You out there putting your body on the line, man.
I was like, after I started smoking, and then I tried to stop, I was like, I ain't going back to the farm. I was like, I'm not going back to that life.
Right.
So then it was like, okay, how do I keep smoking and pass the test? And then it took me a little while to figure it out, but I figured out how to make it through with passing the test. Had a little system. So I make it, and the drug program is 2 years. You got to make it through 2 seasons, and then you're out of the program. Okay. So found my little system, made it through the first year, good, Pro Bowl, All Pro, all that good stuff. Nobody knows, right? Nobody knows, but I'm good. That next year I come back. Again, that's back to where we were. My second year in Miami, that's when everything kind of changed.
Right.
So my second year in Miami, I was thinking, it's time for me to break the 2,000-yard rushing mark and like put my name on the map. I was like, I'm ready. This is it. I kind of all my eggs back in the basket. I said, this is it. And it just didn't work out that way. It's like the Dolphins didn't get a quarterback, and they just kept giving me the ball, giving me the ball. And my body was beat up. And I remember we played the Eagles it was Monday night. We played the Eagles, and we lost that game, and we were out of playoff contention. And I was hurt. And I remember I smoked that night. I went to bed, and the dude was coming to drug test me at 6 a.m. So set my alarm, have my little system. I drink my little drink so my urine's clear for 5 hours, okay? So I wake up early. I was up late. I woke up early, drank my drink, and then I fell asleep. Because part of the system is you got to drink the drink twice, and then you're good. But I fell asleep, and then I woke up when he knocked on the door, and I was like, damn. I was like, I'll probably be fine. Pissed. Got a letter the next week that I failed a drug test. So now it's the second failed test. And the big thing about the second failed test is they fine you. And the biggest thing about the fine is they take it out of your check, which means the team has to know that you failed a drug test.
Okay. So this is the NFL. It's not even the team.
It's not even the team. So the idea, some players don't care, some players do. I did at the moment. So nobody knew I was in the drug program. Nobody.
Right.
The NFL does a decent job of keeping it confidential. So the team didn't know, but after that second test, the public doesn't know, but the team knows.
Okay.
And it feels silly to say it now, but in that time, like the team knowing that I smoked, it was like, you can relate to this. It was like, they got something on me now.
Yeah. Yeah.
They got something.
Now they're going, this is going to be what they point to.
Exactly. Exactly. When I go for a renegotiation to get paid, right? They got something on me. So I was like, okay. So I kind of pushed through that. And then something happened where it leaked to the public that I failed a drug test. And that was something, again, it feels silly saying it now. That's something I don't think I was ready for. Right? It's one thing the team knows and they're going to keep it on the low, but now the public knows,
Right.
And not that my image was 100% pure, but at least back in 2004, I felt like, it would tarnish my image.
Yeah. And I think most athletes at that point would think that in 04.
100%. So I was kind of bent out of shape. And at the same time, I was thinking, like, this is a lot. This is a lot. And so when I failed another drug test and it was going to be a 4-game suspension, I just said, I'm out. I said, I'm good. I said, it's time for me to do something else anyway.
Okay.
I think the significant thing about that moment is before then, I didn't consider cannabis as being medicinal, right? There was, at least in the football world, there was nobody having that conversation, nobody talking about it like that.
Right.
So I thought I just was smoking because that's what we do. But when I had to stop during the football season, I realized I'm not doing this just for fun. I'm doing this because it helps, right? It helps my body, it helps my mind, it helps me feel good about getting up in the morning and doing this again.
Right.
And also I noticed that when I started smoking more, that I stopped taking the pills that they gave me less.
Okay.
And pills that they were giving me, they're giving me Paxil for my social anxiety, and they were giving me Indocin. It's an NSAID, like anti-inflammatory.
Okay.
And the guys would joke, it's funny because if you didn't take the anti-inflammatory the night before, your body was hurting at practice the next day.
Okay.
So the guys would joke, there's gonna be a bad day if they forgot to take their pills. And I started thinking about it. In order for us to feel good to practice, we have to take pills.
Right.
You know? And when I started smoking, I didn't have to take as many pills to practice.
Okay.
And when I stopped smoking because I failed drug tests, I noticed I was taking a lot more pills, and I just didn't feel good to me.
Right. And you said those pills are anti-inflammatory, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the things cannabis helps with is inflammation in certain areas.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably too much information, but we also used to joke because if you didn't eat before you took the anti-inflammatories, it would tear up your stomach.
Oh,
Bad.
for real? Okay.
Bad. I won't get details, but it would tear up your stomach bad. So it's just the side effects. And again, I wasn't reading anything, and there was no one that was talking to me about it, so I didn't have the language. But my own lived experience was I prefer to the point where I jeopardized my career. Is I preferred the cannabis because it felt more like I was taking care of myself than the pills,
Right.
where it felt more like I was masking stuff.
Right. Wow. That's real. And yeah, I'm just thinking now, like how everybody kind of painted it on you. Oh, he's choosing weed over the NFL, and it's like, nah, you were choosing you
Yeah.
over what you would put. And then like, it's so many levels to it because, like you said, it helps with the body, it helps with the mental. And you said you was it anxiety medication?
Anxiety medication.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was taking. See, it's the same idea, and this is what I realized about pharmaceuticals. It's like so much about the pills that the doctor was giving me. It was like to cover stuff up, to hide it, to pretend like it wasn't there, and like the pills make it better. But whether it was the anxiety or the underlying cause of the pain, the pills didn't make it better. It just put me in a position where I was pushing myself beyond where it was good for me.
Right.
And I noticed with cannabis, it was making me feel better, but from a different perspective of being more aware of what hurts, where I feel the pain, so that I can go to treatment, so that I can stretch, so that I can do something about it, rather than just popping a pill and going about my business.
Yeah, well, you pop the pill and then, everything hurts. But when you a little more tuned in, you're like, oh, wait a minute, this part of my knee that's, okay.
And it might seem simple, but true story. My second year in Miami, I had this little strain right behind my calf muscle, and I'll go to the doctors and I'll try to get them to explain it to them, and they didn't know what I was talking about. And so finally I said, screw it. And we had like the medical books in the training room. So I just got one of the books and I like looked at that part of my body and I looked really closely and I saw there's this little tiny muscle, and I said, it's called the popliteal muscle. I said, it's that muscle right there. And once I showed the doctor exactly what muscle it was, they knew how to treat it and it got better that quick.
Wow.
So I just found it's a different mindset, and because I think the mindset of most athletes, hopefully it's changing coming in, is it's kind of like they can use my body any way they want and I have to follow all their rules, right? And to me, I just couldn't make that work. So I think as things are changing and the leagues are allowing the players to consume cannabis, it is giving the players more tools to be able to better take care of themselves. And I think it helps just in the mindset of an athlete. There's something that it does that allows us to feel more free and not like we're boxed in to do the work that they want us to do and we can't even take care of ourselves.
Wow. As you're saying this, when you're saying you stepped away from it, I'm allowed a lot more insight. I think people can now, like, just you saying that's like, oh, wait a minute. Like, yeah, that was definitely a decision for yourself.
Tell you, I can feel it. I can feel like if I come back and try to do this, I'm gonna get hurt.
Okay.
Because my heart's not in it. I'm somewhere else. I had this taste of the things that I could be experiencing. And again, I started doing the math and I said, my life is short. And if I don't take this time to get to know myself and live a little bit now, I might never have the opportunity to.
Right.
And I feel like I accomplished everything I wanted to and needed to with football. So I felt good about taking that next step.
I mean,
I was free. I'm telling you, it was scary to make that call, but as soon as I hung up the phone, like, the cannabis stuff aside, to me, I think the cannabis was my ticket out. It gave me a way to get out.
Right.
It truly did, in a couple of ways. One, because I got in trouble, but two, it opened my mind to even imagine that I could be something other than a football player.
Right.
I think a lot of guys, the reason they stay playing football so long is they can't imagine themselves doing anything else that would feel as good as football.
Right.
And And I started to see I'm not going to be able to do this for the rest of my life. I need to find something else I love. And when I started traveling, I was like, I love this experience of being able to go anywhere in the world, and have an experience and be myself. And then I was traveling and I met this guy who gave me a book on alternative healing.
Okay.
And I started flipping through it, and I noticed there was a whole chapter on cannabis. And it was the first time that I had seen cannabis even mentioned alongside of something positive. So of course, with my experience, I was all in this book, and I started reading everything I could. And I started to realize there was a whole nother side of the story that we'd never been exposed to.
Right.
And then I became passionate about trying to get to the bottom of that.
Right. So that's when you came back kind of with the advocacy, right? Once you but it's crazy that you didn't use your own personal experience because, like you said, it was two-sided for you. Like it's been good for, but only I know how it's been good for me, and everybody else views it this one way. What was something that, when was that moment when it was like, oh, okay, I've got to, because you said you went to school for you. You've been to several schools.
Yeah, I've been to a bunch of schools.
Yeah, so when was it this is because they call it alternative medicine, but I don't like to call it that because that tries to make it sound like it's crazy.
It actually
wrong.
came way before
and it's the
medicine.
OG medicine.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
this is the part of the conversation that I don't think anybody talks about enough. You know? And part of it is we don't have the language. It's like the dark ages of cannabis when it was made illegal, we lost the language. We lost the way people used to talk about it. But if you go back to the late 1800s, doctors knew how to talk about cannabis, and they had some clarity about all the things it could help with. But I feel like we've lost our ability to how to talk about it. And I think the biggest motivation for my advocacy is to empower people with the language and the permission to talk, to share their actual experience about it. Because we're talking about something that happened in 2004, 2005. It took 10 years from there before I really felt confident enough to be an advocate.
Right.
And up until that point, my advocacy was not lying about it.
Right.
Not lying too much about it, right? That was my advocacy, is somewhat telling the truth. And I remember when I came up here right after I retired, I was sitting interviewing for 60 Minutes with Mike Wallace. And Mike Wallace asked me point blank, if the NFL tested you right now, would you pass the drug test? And I remember sitting there and being nervous because all these people were watching, and I was like, I have an opportunity to lie or to tell the truth,
right?
And somehow I told the truth, right?
Right.
And to me, that was my first form of true advocacy.
Right.
But it wasn't until 10 years later where I was living in Austin because I went back to school after I retired, and a teammate of mine, Kyle Turley, big time advocate, he's all in. He called me up and he said, hey, there's a cannabis conference at the convention center in Phoenix. Why don't you come out and tell your story? And I was in Austin and I was getting a lot of flack for my reputation. So I was like, I'm good. I said, I'm good. And I hung up the phone and I sat there and I thought about it and I was like, first I was like, there's a cannabis convention at a convention center? I was like, whoa. I was like, okay. And then I thought, fuck it. Everybody knows I smoke anyway.
Yeah.
So I called him back up and I was like, I'll do it.
Yeah.
That's when that real advocacy started.
Okay.
I remember I went to Phoenix and I was sitting on the stage. There's probably 150 people in the audience. And it was the first time that I told my story, that I actually shared how it made me feel and how I used it. And it was cathartic. It was healing, because it was something that I kept inside that I didn't talk about, and to share it with people. Right? Powerful. Most powerful, though, was afterwards. 20, 30 people came up to me afterwards and basically told me I was their hero. And because I hadn't put myself out there, I didn't have exposure to the way that my story touched a lot of people.
Right.
Because the way it unfolded for me, I kind of felt like a coward, But to see that because I, tried, I made an effort, that it really inspired other people when their parents or their coaches were giving them a hard time about smoking. They could point to me and say, look, he's doing it and look at him.
Right.
I was like, whoa. And I remember something my mom always says. She says, go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. And I felt like in that cannabis convention, right, for the first time since I failed a test, that I was actually being celebrated. Without the asterisk,
Right.
Because people would, like, the stories would, even if someone wrote a positive story about me, right at the bottom they would say he failed multiple drug tests.
Right.
And I was like,
right.
Like, do we really need to, like, throw that in every story?
That was about my stats. You don't have to put that in there. Like, or included in the stats. Like, yes. he was high when he did this. That's more impressive to me. That's what I thought when the thing happened with the track runner, Sha'Carri. I was like, if she did that high, she needs more credit. Like, she was locked in. She was focused. Oh, man. Also, they named the stadium.
They named the field,
The field, Campbell Williams.
Campbell Williams Field.
Yeah, so you were Earl Campbell.
The thing that I'm most proud of is people have any consideration of, I shouldn't be doing this or I should hide this. They can look at the field and be like, he did it. He got a field named after him.
Right.
It was, it was coming to fruition of a dream. I remember when it became public that I retired, and it was because of a failed drug test, and the media got a hold of it and all these negative stories. And I started to believe the stories. I started to think, damn, I threw my whole life away. And I said, wait. I'm the one who decides how this story goes next. And I said, if I live my life in a way where people are impressed, right, then it might have the opposite effect. If people are being like, well, maybe I should try some of that.
Right.
Yeah. Because I believe that if I stick true to my guns, right, everything will be all right.
Yeah.
And when I got the statue, when they changed the name of the field to Campbell Williams Field, that's when I felt like I knew it.
Right.
Like I felt proud. I felt proud for sticking in my guns because I got I got my name there and I got the statue doing it my way.
Right.
Not having to pretend to be something I wasn't, not doing that. It's gonna be funny to see how it evolves because most of us adults now have come out of a place where it's prohibition, where it was always something different or you had to hide it. But I imagine, maybe even my youngest kid or pretty soon after is not gonna have that stigma so much that they have to deal with. So they're gonna have more of a clean slate. And I think what they come up with and how they use it is going to be we're going to see it keep growing and evolving.
Right, and then it might not even be as abusive as I would say how I used it, because now you don't have to run off somewhere. You don't have to go to one person's basement and you don't have to put a bunch of spray on and eye drops and try to...
The whole thing, yeah.
Like now you feel like, now you're like, okay, I just needed 2 quick hits, but now it's this whole process. So you're like, I gotta finish it now. Like, you know what I'm saying? I can't bring it back home. Like I got so that's insightful, man. Because so for me, I do comedy, and I did Last Comic Standing, and I had some weed jokes in there, and I remember there were people like, man, you're not gonna be able to talk about weed. It's gonna be on NBC, and I'm like. At this point, it's legal in California. It's like I'm talking about something that's happening, and I wound up winning the show. But it was one of those things where it's like, no, I knew what I was talking about. I just had to, you just had to push through and believe in you.
You've been there.
Yeah. So I mean, I definitely looked at you on the sports side, and I'm like, no, like it's so many people that tried to put that on. Oh, well, you're not gonna have drive. You're gonna be lit. You're not gonna have ambition. You're not gonna, you know what I'm not able to do is deal with all y'all putting stuff on me, but I'm able to deal with it when I have a little,
I'm telling you, I had a conversation today and this dude talking to me. He's like, I smoke to treat my ADHD. And I was like, no. I was like, you smoke to deal with the people that are trying to like label you for being the way you are. Is it?
Yeah.
So that's actually, now that we got to it, that's the deeper reason why I was saying I can't do this if I ain't smoking. Right. It's just being around, and this is real talk, okay? Because part of the drug conversation is about people using substances or whatever to escape their problems. Okay, and that's real, but you don't need cannabis to do that.
No.
Right? There's a lot. You can watch TV. There's a lot of ways. There's a lot of ways to do that. And when I launched my brand Heisman, our tagline is "Spark Greatness" because that's my background and that's my story. And my thing is cannabis helps us recover.
That's
okay,
awesome too.
but if you ain't doing shit, you don't have nothing to recover from, right? So it has to be a balance of actually doing something, right? Because even the creativity has to be the balance of doing something, right, and the need to like come back afterwards and reflect and make the connection so that you can go back and do it again.
Right.
And so I realized that football, I was good at it, but I had like, it wasn't really what I was supposed to be doing. In order to keep myself doing what I wasn't supposed to be doing, I had to smoke.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And I think that's part of the definition of medicine, because sometimes in life we have to do things that we don't really want to do, but we have to learn to take care of ourselves while we're doing it.
Right.
But also the recognition of when it's time to move on and do something else.
I wanted to ask you, what's your relationship with the NFL? Are you advocating with them, or is it a relationship with them now?
Mm-hmm. I've had several conversations with the NFL, mainly on the Players Association side.
Okay.
Because when I was going through my appeals when I failed drug tests, the part of an appeal process is they send someone from the Players Association to support you. But at the time, cannabis was still so stigmatized, it wasn't really much support.
Okay.
You know, they just kind of sat off in the corner, like didn't say anything, to defend me. And so the conversations I've had with them is really getting them to change their attitude about cannabis, to say this is not about substance abuse, this is about wellness, you know? And I've been talking to them about that over and over again, and finally they started to listen. And in the last collective bargaining agreement, they said we're taking cannabis off the table as a negotiating piece for substances of abuse, and we're talking about it as wellness. And that's what started to get the NFL to lighten, so they don't suspend players anymore for failing cannabis tests. And I saw a story today that they've raised the amount of THC metabolites in the urine to like 350 nanograms per milliliter. And that doesn't make sense, that doesn't mean anything to anyone, but when I failed a drug test, it was 0.15 milligrams per nanoliter for THC metabolites. So it was 0.15, now it's 0.33, it's like 350. So it's basically, you have to have a huge cannabis problem in order for the NFL to get on the NFL's radar. Where when I was, you just had to have a tiny bit in your system and they got you.
Yeah, and also cannabis stays in your system longer than a lot of the drugs that are way worse. And
100%. I learned that the hard way.
And if we just look at the NFL as a whole, that's kind of a microcosm of the country, you know? And that's one of the big things that a lot of people look to. So where can people, or how can people do what you're doing, or how can they support what you're doing and advocate for the wellness side of the cannabis industry?
Yeah. So what we've seen in the past decade is the NFL really changing their stance about head injuries, for example. So there's been a huge shift where, because of the fans, that the NFL is having to take player safety more seriously, and they've done it. And I think when cannabis gets lumped into that conversation about player safety and player wellness, I think that's when the NFL really starts to listen. When on social media, you know, they're seeing people say it's a travesty that these guys aren't allowed to take care of themselves through natural means, and they're forced to take pharmaceuticals. And I already know that's what's been opening the NFL's minds, that kind of talk. And I think the more fans, become more player-centric and saying, you know, for what Ricky Williams, you know, puts his body on the line to do all those things, he should definitely be allowed to consume cannabis to take, compared to the alternatives.
Yeah.
Because NFL cannot argue with player health and safety.
Yeah.
You know?
And I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it would benefit them. You're getting the whole person, or at least, you know, them at closer to 100% than just trying to keep putting a Band-Aid on whatever's actually wrong.
But also the alternative, because And this is when I talk to the NBA players, right? This is the argument that they used, the bubble helped. But the argument that NBA players used was, you know, after a game, they have a specific story. I think they must have all got a line. They said those specific games that we had back-to-backs. He said after a game, our adrenaline is so hyped up, you know, that we don't have the ability to come down. So a lot of us are drinking and doing other things.
Right.
Imagine if we could smoke, that allow us to come down and get ready to do it the next day. Right? That's the comment. They all say the same thing. And they use the back-to-backs. Right? But I think when you humanize, and it's easier to humanize basketball players because they're not wearing helmets and all these pads. But I think when you humanize the athlete and you realize what we're doing and the amount of stress, physical, emotional, mental stress, and the alternatives we have to nurture ourselves, based on the current landscape right now, it's just a compassionate choice to allow players all reasonable means to care for themselves.
Right. And like what you've done in allowing other athletes to step forward helps everybody because like you said, it helps athletes take care of themselves. It's the compassion for somebody. Well, it's the same thing for people who have the cancer or the kids who have seizures or anybody who else is using it, like you said, medicinally and to help with wellness. And I think you put it a lot of ways just with talking to you right here that a lot of people don't look at it. A lot of people just are from that, you know, DARE program, just say no, reefer madness era where, oh, you're a druggie, you're a drughead, and taking that out of it, like you said, giving people the right language to be able to talk about it.
I think the language and permission are the two biggest things because if people don't have permission, you can have the language, but they ain't going to use it. Right. And if people have the language, but they don't have permission, they're going to hide. They're going to hide it.
Yeah.
So it's like you got to have both. And I feel like I'm in a position where I can talk, right? And as I talk, people can pick up the language of how I talked about it, ways that it related to them. But permission, right? That's where the advocacy work comes in. Because when the NFL stops testing or takes it off the list, all the players that were too afraid, but they're in a lot of pain, but they are too afraid to try it, it opens the door. All the people in the world, right, that know they need some help and whatever the doctor said isn't working, but they don't want to break the law. I think it's the first time in my life where I've truly appreciated the power of the law.
Right. You know? Yeah.
It's real.
It can actually
That's
help
why,
people.
Like, I've been to DC 3 times, right? And before then, I was like, but this came up, and I was like, because just being in the industry, I've seen so many people, and I heard so many stories, right? Aside from my own, I heard so many stories, and it's not even about me anymore. It's about realizing that because of my story, I have the ability to open doors and hopefully allow other people to have access and relief.
Right. Yeah. What can people do to advocate on their own or, you know, just try to get the thing pushed legally to where it needs to be?
Yeah, so I think what individuals can do is just be honest. It's just, right? And it's not like take a flag and wave it around, you know, at your kid's soccer game. It's not that, but if you're around a mom or someone and they say, you know, I have headaches or I can't sleep, you know, and you know that taking a 5 milligram gummy has helped you sleep, right? Just say something, you know, because it's not about hiding. It's about you have something that might offer someone some relief. And they might look at you like you're crazy or say no, but they hear that enough times, right? Because sometimes it's not the first time and it doesn't feel good to be the first one to put up the idea and the person say that's crazy. But you say it once, they hear it from someone else, they hear it from someone else, they hear it from someone else, and their mind is more open. So I think we can all be advocates by just sharing our story, by being real. More specifically towards the NFL, you know, if a story comes out or you see something, don't be like everyone else and put the same tag. Why was he smoking? Why? Right. I get it, but that doesn't help.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So it's another version of just being honest.
Right.
You know, and if I was given a pep talk, is to like, you know, I'd say find yourself in history. You know, in the future, let's say 10, 15 years down the road, right? This is going to be a part of our everyday life. You know, and do you want to be the person that's like, damn, I missed the boat on that one, all right? Do you want to be the one that feels good because you helped get it to that
I saw
place?
it going to it.
Exactly.
Exactly.
No,
that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you
No,
for
of course.
inviting us out here.
No, this is great.
And hey, I've got to come back out here at some point because I got to check out some of the scenery out here. But
Yeah.
thank you again, man. War on Drugs podcast. Ricky Williams, thank you so much, man.
I feel like I'm a survivor of the war on drugs.
You are a survivor. You a general at this point.
OG,
you definitely a general. You came out of it and you pulled more people through than what they put you through. So we appreciate you, bro.
Oh, glad I could do
Thank
my
you,
part.
man. There it is. Ricky Williams,
Wow.
man, in his own words. Yeah, it was great to be there and just hear his side of the story and how he really wanted his freedom.
He seems at peace, by the way, too. You can
super at peace.
even if you just
yeah.
listen to it, you can feel his like genuine like at ease.
Yeah.
Which was nice. Yeah.
To find something that kind of works for you. For me, I'm like, man, think about how many other people weren't able to find that.
Yeah.
So what talent, what ability, what genius are we missing in the world because we put this stipulation on this one plant?
Yeah. Something that Ricky was talking about that kind of triggered something in me was, kind of this thing of like medicinal versus recreational and what's accepted and what's not. And, thinking about the mid 90s and late 90s, like Dallas Cowboys and going to the White House. And then that was like, everyone was like, hey, that's boys being boys, just getting drunk and having a good time. And like, probably not what we want people to be doing after getting bashed in the head and like abusing alcohol and all these other things, but that's totally acceptable. But,
Right.
Someone having anxiety, dealing with these things at the peak of their powers, really actually trying to use something in a way that is medicinal. Like all the arguments that people have, people just want to go. This is not what was happening here. This was a person trying to deal with this. And it's crazy how far we have come, I think, in that conversation. Because if Ricky's saying that on his own podcast or someone else's, or what's going on about his use on that, I think we look at this today in a completely different light. Like, oh, he has anxiety. I think it's really good that he's talking about, like, then it was, Mike Lupica and the Sports Report, all these people like, this guy is a bum in a bus. All he wants to do is party and have a good time. And it's like, no, that's what everyone else is kind of doing. Like, this guy's actually not. Like, he's trying to see something and trying to put his hand up, and everyone's like, put your hand down. And it wasn't that long ago. Yeah, that was pretty amazing. Yeah.
And one of the things that he said, too, that I think kind of ties into what you were just saying is a lot of times people don't have the language to talk about it.
Right.
And he said at the time he didn't have, he couldn't put it into words. He didn't know that, okay, this actually helps with that. He knows it's helping him, but how are you going to tell somebody when the whole world looks at it like you just said, you're just trying to get high, you're just trying to party, you're just a weed head, you're a stoner. And now that we do have the language and capacity, no matter which side of it you're on, these are conversations that can be had. These are conversations that can be talked about, even if you want to keep your kids away from weed, or if you want to be able to have it medicinally. Now that we have these words like it helps with anxiety, it helps
PTSD,
with
mental
PTSD,
health, like all
it's all of these things that I don't think were even thought of saying in the same sentence with marijuana.
Yeah, like you couldn't talk about being like, hey, I don't think I should play. Now you're not tough. And it was like, oh, you can't. Ricky was always, he can't deal with the pressure.
Right.
And it's like, what does that even mean? Right. I'm just supposed to be dealing with the pressure? Like,
and at the same time.
So I don't have it or I don't. So like you're in fear, you're not a man. Like it was like, it gets to that. It's interesting.
And at the same time, you're dealing with pain. Come take this.
Right, exactly.
Come take this Toradol.
Yeah, yeah.
Come get this shot. That's okay, but this is okay.
Yeah.
And
then the Turk guy, like the health guy, will be like, yeah, he can get you a few more. Like, yeah, I mean, you hear those stories about the pill passing and like the greenies, like the coffee. They were taking amphetamines in the 80s. Yeah, and so it's again, I think it's good that's why hearing these stories, particularly someone that was like in the middle of this area and where we've come now and hearing like how it's different for athletes. And, you think even like very recently, Sha'Carri Richardson, she got suspended. And even a lot of the pushback on her, it really was like, well, this is her fault. She's wrong. Like, she should have known. And like, you know, whatever. But it's
And if she wasn't able to tell her side of it,
right, exactly,
we would have probably rolled with that. And who knows if she would ever got back into the Olympics like that.
And you saw the push. I mean, there was, I don't know if there was, but I assume the vast majority of folks in our country were like, this is not something that she should be knocked out of the Olympics for. And I think there was a lot more empathy on her for
her mother
what she was saying.
Passed, the question had been asked right after a race, ties back into anxiety, mental health issues, those type of things. And me, you know me, come on, man. She won a race with weed in the system. She should get an extra medal.
Yeah.
Like, she won?
She gets a pod play,
Give her an extra little add-on, man.
Yeah.
You know how they give you the thing when you graduate with honors? Like, give her an extra little sash because she is crazy.
She gets a laurel
awesome.
wreath of cannabis pod. Yeah,
Yeah.
Let's look into that. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, special thank you to Ricky Williams, his family, had his kid there. Reminded me of being with my son. It was great. That's the first episode.
Yeah.
What we got up next?
Another amazing athlete, but we're going to talk a little bit more about actual physical pain. And that's with Liz Carmouche. She's a veteran, MMA fighter, gorilla, total badass. She's going to talk about some of her, you know, in a world of combat sport where every fight really could be, you know, one of your last, and, you know, you're constantly under injury and strain and training. CBD's really helped her with her training and keeping at the top of her game so long in that sport, which, you know, it's a pretty short shelf life for a lot of folks. And so we'll keep this ball rolling. But what an awesome guest to kick off with. Ricky Williams, awesome that you got to do that, Clay, and amazing, like, in his home. Like, it's cool to get that vibe. And just been awesome to travel around and see these people where they're at. Again, special thank you to Ricky, and awesome. And that was the War on Drugs.